I have a question for you about Oregon's offense in 2024 that you think you know the answer to, but I'm not sure that you do. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. That's right, over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Oregon offense, couple more football questions, including one pertaining to USC. And then we got some sport check-ins to do because baseball and basketball didn't exactly have the weekends we were hoping for, but it's not all bad news. We start, though, with the Oregon backfield. My question for all of you right now, listening to or watching this show, especially everydayers out there who are as up-to-date with the news and everything roster-wise with Oregon as you could possibly be, who do you think is Oregon's starting running back next year? You probably jump right to Jordan James. If you go on Twitter, Jordan James gets all the buzz. Jordan James was the guy who stepped in the bowl game and looked very good doing it when Bucky Irving wasn't getting carries. Of course, Bucky played in the bowl game, did very well. He's at the NFL Combine. Jackson Powers Johnson. A lot of Ducks been killing it at the Combine. If you want my thoughts on any Oregon potential draftees, by all means, let me know. I'd be happy to talk about that because I have many thoughts and such. But for Jordan James, I think he's got great potential. I'm a big Jordan James fan. I have been since he was a freshman. But Noah Whittington is not someone that can be overlooked in the Oregon backfield. And I don't think Oregon fans are necessarily overlooking him as much as they have just kind of forgotten because he was injured this past year. He only played in 3 games, didn't play against Portland State, played in the next 3, got injured against Colorado, and then unfortunately was out for the rest of the season. But so that left Jordan James to be the number 2 back to Bucky Irving when it was going to be, as it was in 2022, kind of a 3-headed monster. And then it became a 2-headed monster because they didn't have anybody who was ready to step in and fill that void. Dante Dowdell and Jade Lamar were true freshmen. And of course, Dowdell has since transferred away to Nebraska. So I think that for Oregon going into next year, this is a 2-headed backfield. And I don't think that Jordan James is going to be a bell cow sort of back. I think what you are going to have is something that resembles the 2022 backfield, which was pretty close to a 50-50 carry split between Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington. And sometimes Whittington was more in the zone. And look, there were times last year, like the Pac-12 championship game, where I thought Jordan James should have been the guy over Bucky Irving. Both really talented, but very different with their styles. And that, I think, is why James is not going to be a true number 1 bell cow sort of back, which I'm really not a fan of, generally speaking, because when you have a running back that's getting the lion's share of the touches and is touching it 25 to 30 times a game, those guys can struggle to stay healthy, and that's just not what you want to see. And yeah, running backs can get dinged up anyway. Of course, we saw that unfortunately with Whittington last year, but I think that these two guys form more of a 2-headed monster than the general narrative or Oregon's fans' thoughts would be right now. Because the last of the 2 running backs that we've seen was Jordan James. He was very impressive. He is very impressive. He's going to have a very good year. I would not be surprised if Oregon runs the ball well next year if neither one of these guys ends up hitting 1,000 yards on the ground, because I think the carry split could be that good, because I just am not much higher on Noah Whittington, or am thinking about him perhaps more than I think a lot of Oregon fans are. So the numbers look something like this. In 2023, Jordan James had 107 carries for 759 yards and 11 touchdowns. He was almost 8 yards a carry, which is a crazy, crazy high number. He also caught 15 passes for 132 yards and a touchdown. I'll give a shout out to the first comment that I see, and they generally show up in order on YouTube, who can, on our system here, without looking, tell me who Jordan James's receiving touchdown was against last year. I even had to think about it for a hot second, and then it came to me. But James last season, and this is part of the other reason I don't know that he's someone that's going to step in and be, a consistently 20 to 25 carry guy per game. He only had 3 games with 10 or more carries this past year. that'd be a pretty sizable jump to say someone who is consistently touching it fewer than 10 times a game, even after Bucky Irving or after Noah Whittington went down and James was the clear, undisputed number 2 running back. That's still not a huge workload of touches throughout the year. Now, he did very well in the action that he did see. He was the 8th highest graded running back on Pro Football Focus last year. He was 4 points higher actually than Bucky Irving, and I think he does things well that Bucky Irving doesn't excel at, and I think Bucky did things well that Jordan James does not necessarily excel at, and I'll get to that more in just a sec. But when you think about Noah Whittington and look at what he did in 2023, he played in 3 games, again, did not play in the opener against Portland State, had 20 carries for 146 yards, 10 catches for 78 yards. I think Whittington has shown a little bit more in the pass catching department, but James is certainly capable. Had that really nice play on 3rd down against Washington in the Pac-12 title game on that kind of out and up on the sideline. It was a great throw from Bo Nix as well. But Whittington in 2022 had 139 carries, 779 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now, that's only 5.6 yards a carry compared to James's 7.9. Now, Whittington had far more touches. He also had 22 pass catches in that 2022 season for 170 yards and a touchdown as well. I give you those numbers to say, look, on paper, that's why you can look at these two guys and say, well, James has got to be the number 1 guy. He's got to be the number 1 back. But one thing that made Oregon's backfield really good the last couple of seasons is having guys with different running styles. And I think James and Whittington have different styles. I think even when you put Bucky Irving in the mix, you had 3 guys with different running styles. And that, to me, is a good thing because running backs can often be about who's got the hot hand, who's, seeing the holes open up, who's breaking tackles and everything like that. Noah Whittington is someone who has tremendous lateral quickness. I think he's capable, but not as good as Jordan James in a short yardage situation. But both of these guys are fast. In fact, I think if you did at full health, and that's another thing that is certainly context dependent for 2024, is Noah Whittington's got to be healthy, and he's got to stay healthy because Jordan James, as we know, is very capable. I think if these guys ran a sprint all the way down the field, Whittington would probably win. I think Whittington's got a little more acceleration. I think he's got a little bit more lateral movement. And I think Jordan James is a better version of C.J. Verdell, who was a solid, productive running back for the Ducks behind some great offensive lines, but certainly Verdell had his limitations. I think Jordan James is a more explosive and dynamic version of what C.J. Verdell was. He's a one-cut kind of back. He's a physical runner. He wants to get downhill, and Whittington's got a little bit more side to side. And then Bucky Irving's running style is, of course, unique amongst all of these because he would just stop and start in a way that we hadn't seen since LaMichael James. And sometimes, like against Washington in the Pac-12 title game, it didn't go as well. But boy, when it went well, there's nothing like it. And he's just a hard guy to tackle. But his lateral, or Washington State, for instance, probably Bucky's best individual performance last year for the Ducks offensively. But I think that these two guys having different running styles and the way that Carlos Laughlin and offensive coordinators and Dan Lanning have managed the running back room over the last couple of years. And Lanning has said a couple of different times that, you got talented guys, you want to get them the ball and get them opportunities to make plays. When you have these unique styles, they have employed them at different points throughout the course of a game over the last couple of years. That's why I think this is closer to a 2-headed backfield. I don't think this is Jordan James's 1 and Noah Whittington's 2. I think this is 1A, 1B. And frankly, if Whittington's back to full health, I would not be shocked if he's the lead guy over Jordan James. I think it could go either way. James has put on a really impressive show, but I think we've kind of forgotten, because we didn't see as much of Noah Whittington last year, just how good he is in the open field. And if you want to be reminded of it and see the sort of run that Bucky could make from time to time, but certainly I don't think we've seen Jordan James break out with just yet. Watch his touchdown in the 2022 season against Arizona. That sort of shiftiness and lateral movement is something that Whittington brings to the table that James does not. But if you give me a 3rd and 1, I want Jordan James on the field every single day and twice on Sundays or Saturdays in this particular instance. But let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @SMcLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks. Could Oregon play USC in the Big Ten championship game next year? Yeah. I think that's entirely possible, and I'll tell you why. after I tell you about our friends over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue, it's perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google is built in, so you're always updating and you're on call for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. Or you can check out the Nissan Pathfinder, which seats up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower. That's a lot of horsepower right there. And up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Go check them out and shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Some days I need a second segment sip more than others. This is one of those high need sort of days. Let's dive in the mailbag, shall we? I love a good mailbag. YouTube comments or X, as I mentioned. If you want priority access, you can join the flock over at Subtext and become a Locked On Ducks insider. Get all my breaking news, reactions, and instant thoughts, analysis, more in-depth. Talk with me one-on-one, all sorts of perks when you go join over there. Free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month. Absolutely not a requirement, though. This question, courtesy of Beginner Catholic, goes something like this. Question, what would need to happen for the Big Ten championship to be Oregon versus USC? I think this answer is fairly simple. Oregon and USC play to their full potential. Vegas is not as high on USC as they are on Oregon this year. I think that is accurate. I think that's the way it should be. Oregon has higher expectations and aspirations than USC will in 2024. But the reason it could easily transpire that the Ducks and the Trojans meet at the Big Ten Championship, which I believe is played in Indianapolis. I should probably know that as the host of a podcast of a team in the Big Ten, of course. It's not real yet. It hasn't hit me. It won't until that first conference game against Michigan State. Or the random ones against Purdue and Illinois and that sort of stuff. But anyway, so USC's win total is 7.5, but Oregon and USC don't play each other. Now, I wasn't actually expecting this to be the case. I thought the Big Ten would have all 4 West Coast schools play each other every year. Instead, you're only guaranteed to play 2 a year. There's a protected rival, which are the LA schools and then Oregon and Washington. And then you play sometimes 2 LA schools if you're Oregon or Washington, but you're only guaranteed to play 1. I didn't think they would do it that way, but that's what they have chosen. And so Oregon plays UCLA this year to begin conference play, and they don't play USC. So you wouldn't even have the, tiebreaker scenario of are they going to get in over this team or that team and such with regards to a head-to-head matchup, right? Like Oregon and Washington last year, they play in the first game, and then, you don't have divisions, and the Big Ten does not have divisions anymore either. Nobody does, and they shouldn't, because divisions in college football are dumb, just like auto bids. Okay, so I think that for Oregon and USC to get there, Oregon has to play to his potential, right? Win at least 10 games, maybe 11. 10 is the bare minimum, and that's the bare minimum of what I'd consider a successful season for the Ducks next year. But USC's win total is 7.5. I think they can win more than that. Now, their schedule is brutal. It's absolutely brutal. They've got a non-conference game in Las Vegas against LSU. They've also got Penn State that comes across the country to play them. They have to play, I think, one or both of Michigan and Ohio State. They have a difficult schedule. There's no doubt about that. But USC is good. They weren't a bad team last year. They were bad compared to their expectations, right? It's all about where you're thinking about a team before a season. Because USC last year should have been in the top 10 all year long. They were preseason top 10. I had them in our Locked On poll preseason top 5 because I thought they deserved to be in that particular space. And then it became clear in the second half of the season, they did not, because their defense did not get any better. It was atrocious. But here's the thing. That's going to be the question again for USC. And they have made the right moves on that side of the ball. They have brought in all conference caliber players from around the Pac-12, but most importantly, they brought in UCLA's defensive coordinator, who was with our old friend Chip Kelly at UCLA last year. D'Anton Lynn is very good. And so USC's defense might not be at its full potential this season with the talent that they can bring into that Trojans roster, but they are at the very least going to be better schematically and more sound with things like tackling and assignments, because they could not have been any worse last year. So can USC get to 10 or 11 wins? Yeah, they can. And look, I think that win totals are great things to look at and examine as to how to feel about a particular football team. Last year, Arizona's win total was 4.5, and they went 10-3 after they won their Alamo Bowl against Oklahoma, right? 9-3 in the regular season. They almost beat USC, they almost beat Washington, and they almost beat, there was somebody else in there. Who'd they lose to? I can't think of it off the top of my head, but they thumped Utah just like Oregon did. Teams can go way over win total. I think USC over 7.5 is going to take place because you're going to have a great offense with Lincoln Riley there. Now, their defense has to step up. It has to be improved, but it doesn't have to be great. That's the thing. It does not have to be great. So if USC were to blow past that win total, and I think they will at least by one game, if not 2 or 3, yeah, a 10-2 USC team who's got, maybe a non-conference loss to LSU, that team's probably in the Big Ten championship game. And Oregon, if they were to be a 10-2 or 11-1, they could be in the Big Ten championship game as well. So yeah, it's completely feasible. And I don't think you would have, a situation where one team knocks the other out of the running. That's what I was kind of trying to say earlier when I first started talking about this, which is, last year, Washington almost knocked Oregon out of the running. In fact, they would have if they'd had divisions, but that doesn't happen here. Oregon, USC play schedules that, they could just go each win 11 games and you could find them in the conference championship game. So, yeah, I think USC can be there. Ohio State has got a better roster, but I don't think USC is bad. And Oregon fans might not love hearing me say that, but hey, I'm rocking a grass is damn green in Eugene shirt. So we're not questioning my fandom here. Gosh, I hope not. This question came in from Blaine. And by the way, great question from Beginner Catholic there. I talk about the Big Ten teams all the time over on Locked On College Football, so if you want to know more about a particular opponent for the Ducks, always let me know. This question from Blaine. I'm worried about our special teams play. Maybe we can use some of that speed to return the ball. Maybe we could put some emphasis on special teams play. Well, I think our special teams improved last year. The numbers back that up. Now, Camden Lewis regressed, and that stunk. It stunk big time for Oregon. Atticus Sappington comes over from Oregon State. He missed 1 field goal last year. He only attempted 14, but he made 13 of them. So I don't know how much better you can get in that particular area. He'll have some competition, perhaps, in camp. You got Grant Metters, who was on the roster last year. You've got Gage Hurick, the highly touted freshman from Westland, coming in. But I think the Ducks are going to be fine in the kicking game. Last year, I thought their kick coverage and punt coverage was vastly improved. The return game, though, as I've talked about on a recent episode of the show, was bad. There was only 1 punt return over 20 yards, and there were zero kick returns over 25 yards. So I think Oregon is looking for a returner. I hope they are. I think that's something going into spring football where they should be looking at options. I don't care what class, what position, or anything of that sort. I do have one qualifier on who I'd like to be a return man for the Ducks, but I think that they need to be looking in the return game to find someone that can be better than what Gary Bryant was as the primary kick returner last year for the Ducks. And, Noah Whittington's returned kicks before. I wouldn't be opposed. I would not be opposed. However, I am iffy, shall I say, on taking a starter on offense. Not entirely opposed, because if someone is just so good that he's got to be back there, then I'm okay with it. But I'm not a huge fan of having an important starter on offense be your primary kick returner. Punt returner, you're not getting hit as often. Put whoever you want back there. And I think Tez Johnson will be Oregon's punt returner last year. I thought he did a nice job. Would I want Tez Johnson returning kicks? No. Do I have PTSD from Devin Allen getting hurt in the Rose Bowl against Florida State? Maybe just a little bit. Maybe, possibly, just a little bit. So I think the Ducks have got to find a way to upgrade their kick return game, because I don't expect the offense to be all of what it was last year. I expect it to be very good. I expect to be good enough to compete for a Big Ten championship, make the college football playoff, and compete for a national championship. I do not think Dylan Gabriel can be as good as Bo Nix. So who should Oregon be looking to in the return game? Well, that's coming up. First, though, we talk about FanDuel because that is America's #1 sports book. And that's right, you can get buckets with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, all that and more. Oregon's national championship, win total, and Big Ten championship odds, and Dylan Gabriel Heisman odds are all over there at FanDuel. If you feel good about one, by all means, fire away. It's free country. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Okay, so a couple names that I'd watch for as spring football unfolds as for who could be a kick returner. And Gary Bryant Jr., to his credit, didn't fumble last year. And that's the #1 thing I look for in a return man. Don't fumble the ball, just get it to the offense. Kick return, punt return, but specifically on punt return, because it's harder to catch the ball that's kind of jackknifing down with a wobbly spiral than it is an end-over-end kick. But don't fumble the ball. Get it to the offense. That's priority #1. They did a great job of that last year. But priority #2 is get good field position. Oregon didn't have that last year. So Noah Whittington has returned kicks before. I'm not opposed. And by the way, I think the staff sees this as a problem. I mean, Bucky Irving returned, if memory serves, a kick in the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. He didn't do that a ton last year, but they were looking for options. So Whittington, assuming full health, could be an option. But again, not crazy about that idea just because he's coming off an injury and the chance back there is higher than average, shall we say, or at least that's how it can seem at times. Two names to watch for, though, Roderick Pleasant and Ryan Pelham. Now, these are young guys. Pleasant is, I don't know if he officially redshirted this past season, but he hasn't played a ton. He did play on special teams on defense last year, as in kick coverage, but he did not play on the offensive side. But Pleasant was one of the fastest players in the 2023 recruiting cycle. And Ryan Pelham is a speedster himself, the wide receiver who Oregon flipped from USC on National Signing Day back in December. And he also is someone who, according to Greg Biggins of 24/7 Sports, has got the potential to be a return man and can make an impact in that area of the field. So I would look to see if those two guys, like that's something that I will definitely be kind of loosely following as spring football goes along. And the first practice is, I believe, March 14th. They have a couple practices and they go on spring break, and then they'll come back and be back to it and such. But you need someone that's got that explosive dynamic speed, yes. And, Pelham has got a shiftiness to him, and Pleasant has got the straight line speed. But you need someone who, it's an underrated part of being running back. You got to have vision. Like Mikael Wright was a great kick return. He had 2 kick returns for touchdowns in the 2021 season. He's the last Oregon player to return a kick for a touchdown, as a matter of fact, unless I am misremembering, but I don't think that I am. Yeah, you have to have speed. You got to be comfortable with the ball in your hand. You got to be able to protect it, but you got to have the right sort of vision, the right sort of feel. And that's something that I think can play out in spring practice. So I agree with you, Blaine, that special teams can improve, but I thought punt coverage, I thought kick coverage was all very good last year. I hope Atticus Sappington or someone else who can be a kickoff specialist can stop kicking the ball out of bounds. That would be great, but I think Joe Lohrig's very good. The special teams coach, he's very well respected, has a great track record, and there are a number of areas that Oregon improved upon from 2022 to 2023. So diagnose what the new problems are and go fix them. That's what I would like to see happen. All right, let's talk basketball and then wrap with a little bit of baseball here. So Dana Altman's squad had a massive opportunity going to number 6 Arizona. They were a big underdog, and they got housed. And that game was over quickly. It was over very quickly. Now, Oregon's offense did not sputter in this game. Jermaine Couisnard did all he could possibly do. He had 39 points in this game. I believe that's a career high. Oregon put up 83 points. If you didn't know the score, and I told you Oregon put up 83 points but lost, how many points do you think they lost by? Probably 4 or 5, 6 or 7, 8 or 9, maybe 10. But, man, no, they lost by 20. They gave up 103 points, which in a 40-minute college basketball game is crazy. It's crazy. So that's a poor effort. Now, Oregon was shorthanded because they have been for the last several weeks, and there are a lot of peaks and valleys. Matt Prame of 24/7 Sports and the Odds and Audibles podcast was talking about that on X, formerly known as Twitter, after the game. And I thought he was making good points, which is when you have a young team, which it is, when you have, I mean, Jackson Shellstad and KJ Evans are true freshmen. They are two of the most important players that the Ducks have. So when you have a young team that also lacks depth, you can have a lot of peaks and valleys. And their peaks have been quite good. Their valleys have been pretty bad. And I think from last year, their valleys are actually higher, but I think their peaks are lower, if that makes sense. So this was a bad effort. I don't care how many guys you're missing. You should never give up 103 points in a game. That is just not good. That is not good. Now, this is not all bad news here. It's not all bad news. I'm starting with the bad news and ending with the good news for both basketball and baseball here, because the bad news is that Oregon missed a chance to pick up what would have been their biggest win of the season. They are now in the double digits in the loss category, sitting at 19-10 and 11-7 in conference play. The good news, though, is I don't think Oregon's bubble hopes are completely dead. But they have to win both games this week. That even might not be enough. You got Colorado and Utah, who beat Oregon earlier this season when the Ducks were on the road. And then Folly Dante was still trying to work his way back in and such. And Dana Altman, put out a message or a quote somewhere saying that, they need support going into these final two games and could really use it. If you're in Eugene, he's 100% right. Get to the games. Because to think that their at-large NCAA tournament hopes are done, I don't think is accurate. You're playing two teams that are also vying for spots in the NCAA tournament field. If you beat both teams, that puts you in a pretty good position. I won't say a great one, but a plausible one. And then Oregon would be a top 4 team in the conference tournament. And of course, the auto bid is still in play if they're able to win a couple of games there. But you want to shore up a top 4 seed to make sure that you get a bye, number one. But number two, if you're Oregon, you win these two games against Colorado and Utah, who are both, on the bubble as well for the NCAA tournament. And then you go to the Pac-12 tournament and play one of these teams again, or play, someone else that, other than Arizona, there aren't a lot of teams that can give you a quality win. But what if, say, you were able to find a matchup with Washington State somewhere, like in the semifinals, and then you lose in the conference tournament championship game? You could do something there. So if Oregon still could have a chance to add up to 3 quality wins, maybe 4, without winning the Pac-12 tournament. Yeah, that's right. So the opportunity's there, but Oregon's got to finish. They got to finish, and they got to play well. I did not expect them to win that game in Arizona. I was not feeling good. I was messaging with one of you over on Subtext about it, and I said, I'm not feeling confident. There was a reason I wasn't feeling confident in that particular game. All right, flush it, move on, come back home, where Oregon has been very good but not unbeatable. You have to win both these games, though. If you lose just one of these games, at-large is done, I think, and then you just have to win the Pac-12 tournament, or they'll miss the NCAA tournament for the 3rd year in a row, and then we'll assess when that time feels like it's going to arrive, but hopefully it doesn't. All right, wrapping up with baseball here, because I've had messages from several people who enjoy baseball coverage and want to know what's going on. And look, I love baseball. I'm a Mariners fan, but I'm also an Oregon fan, and I loved Oregon baseball last year. Gosh, it was great. And there are a lot of new faces in this year's team, and they were working out some of those kinks in the lineup for the first 2 games against UC Santa Barbara. Now, the Gauchos were ranked in the top 25 going into the series, but Oregon was at home. So you would have liked to have seen a series win, but at the very least, Oregon avoided getting swept at home. That's the good news. I should have started with the bad news. The bad news, they lost the first 2 games, and they allowed 6.5 runs per contest. They gave up 9 in the 3rd game as well. So the pitching staff, not its best weekend. But again, UC Santa Barbara, very good team. Oregon, though, what was concerning was in the first 2 games, they didn't hit. They did not hit. They put up 2 runs in the first game, and I think it was just 3 or 4 in the second. And they made some late pushes, but they weren't able to get over the hump. And then Sunday rolled around. Sunday rolls around, and Oregon's trying to avoid getting swept at home. I don't care if you're playing top 10 Oregon State. You can't get swept at home. Just not something you can do. And Oregon was able to avoid it. Thankfully, Oregon was able to avoid it. Now, how they did it is what leaves me the most encouraged right now for how the season is going so far. Oregon is now 7-3 after going 1-2 against the Gauchos, and they were down 5-0 in the third inning. There was a grand slam in the second inning. UC Santa Barbara got one more in the fifth, and Oregon was looking like, oh boy, this is just going to be miserable in miserable weather. And then all of a sudden, the bats came alive, and Oregon wins the game 16-9. And I want to shout out the bullpen as well, because Kevin Strider only went 2 innings, and then the bullpen came in, and they did a heck of a job. A heck of a job. And then the bats came alive, and Oregon wins the game 16-9. So, do I feel great about losing 2 or 3 at home? No. But do I feel great about how they won on Sunday and what it does for locker room morale? I do. I feel very, very good about that, because baseball's a long season, a lot of games, and you need those moments to give yourself that sense of belief to set in over the course of such a long season. And I think that Sunday game can absolutely do that. So men's basketball 19-10, baseball sitting at 7-3. We'll see what happens this week. There's always a new opportunity to get better. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.